Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that your name be glorified in all that we do. We seek to love you, honor you, and obey you. We seek to glorify your name. We seek to be representatives of your kingdom and representatives of our new understanding and who we are through our relationship with you. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today's first reading has got to be one of my favorites, and it really is something that I love to talk about. Now, first of all, I may have told you that I have studied, and I took a course, okay? So just so you know, I don't have a degree in it, but I took a course. As I love to say, I studied biblical archaeology at Harvard University. I was at the Divinity School, and I did. I studied under Lawrence Stagger, and fascinating. I did it in my deacon year, so that was my last semester, which that was probably, was it that one? I think it was. That was probably a bit of a mistake because you're trying to get a lot done. Or was it the semester before? But anyway, it was the last year. So it takes a lot of work to get that done. So anyway, there I was at Harvard Divinity School studying, of course, biblical archaeology. So I've been interested in biblical archaeology, and in light of that, today is the story of Emmaus. If you want to look it up and you want to read it, which I'd encourage you to do because it's a wonderful story, Luke 24:13 through 35. No one has actually ever found definitively this town of Emmaus. They know it existed, but they're not sure exactly where it was. And you know, there is no sign that says you've welcome to the town of Emmaus. So as they go through the various excavations looking for this town, they found, I think it's 5 candidates, and they're all about a day's journey, I guess. Was that what it was? But whatever distance it is, 7 miles. They're all about 7 miles from Emmaus. Now, obviously, the 7 miles is a modern term because the term miles didn't exist then. That would be in feet, and that didn't exist. That's the imperial system. So, but going by what they assumed to be the rough distance, they were able to find several candidates for what could have been Emmaus. The story is one of my absolute favorite stories because here it is. It's Jesus' resurrect from the dead, and you've got these disciples walking to Emmaus, and they're all hearing of the resurrection from the dead, but they're still dealing with the shock of the death of Jesus on the cross. So they're hearing the resurrection, but they don't understand it fully, and they're starting to see the shock of this whole understanding of the death of Jesus, who they expected, as they said, to be the one. And Jesus appears to them, but not in a way that they'd recognize this was Jesus. And he's a stranger. And he starts talking to them after he listens to them and then starts talking to them about this Messiah and all that's said about him in the scriptures. Now, we talked a little bit earlier back in Lent about certain scriptures that obviously would have connected to him. But there he was saying that all of this was going to happen. And they continue on in Emmaus and still see him as a stranger. And it wasn't until they invite him along, kind of an interesting thing. He was going to keep going, but they invited him to be with them, right? So they invited him to be with them, and they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. Now, the scene we're talking about here is from Luke. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. So this comes to us from the Gospel of Luke. And of course, since we're reading the Acts of the Apostles with it, but this comes to us from the Gospel of Luke. Now, think of this. I want you to kind of put these two things together. He was going to keep on going, but they invited him to join them for dinner. And they had the breaking of the bread. And in the breaking of the bread, they recognized them. Take those same elements and we can see it somewhere else. Where? When Jesus was walking on water. remember, famous line from that passage, he had no, I always get a kick out of this, he had no intention of stopping at the boat, It says right there, he was just kind of walking by. Now, obviously, he knew what he was doing, but he was walking by, and then they were shocked to see him. So that same thing. And then he ends up in the boat and joins them. And then later, what do? They feed the 5,000. So there is a parallel to that. But anyway, what happens is that he ends up in the breaking of the bread. They finally recognize that this was Jesus all along, and then he vanishes in front of them. Couple things to notice. He is in a glorified, resurrected body. That means he's not a ghost. That's refuted all the time. He was not a ghost. He was body and soul. They recognized him in the body. They felt his presence. This is all part of this. But the other thing is they are all lost in this mystery, and he starts explaining to them that this was all part of this. Now, there's another part that I'll be discussing on the other side of the break, and probably also continuing throughout the week. But you need to see that he is also telling them that he resurrected from the dead. But remember what I said, his resurrection changes everything. So now they're getting to understand he resurrected from the dead, and they're eventually, of course, then they run back and tell everyone, they're eventually going to understand what an impact it has on their anthropology. We'll talk more in a few minutes. We'll be right back right after this. Have you told anyone else about St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, here on WEZE in the early morning and through CatholicAudiomedia.com?
You realize we are a different Catholic program because we are not speaking just to Catholics.
We speak to ex-Catholics, atheists, evangelicals, and people from all different religious and non-religious backgrounds.
We do this from a Catholic perspective.
So you're not going to hear what you hear on other programs because we have a different mission serving Jesus Christ.
Tell your friends what we do here is different, and it is so that we all may experience Jesus, who sets us all free. And don't forget our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can connect to the parish. That's St. Anthony in Allston, Massachusetts. And you can also check out our program. You can check out our Substack newsletter and everything else. Remember, you have an opportunity to come to Mass, 10 o'clock a.m. on Sundays. By the way, on Tuesdays, I have a discussion group. You're welcome to come to the rectory Tuesdays at 7 o'clock. So 10 o'clock a.m. Sundays, Tuesdays at 7 o'clock p.m. So we're continuing this discussion, this powerful discussion of now the apostles or the disciples are listening to this description through all the scriptures saying that what happened to Jesus was going to happen. It was all planned. It was all set up. This all had to happen. And therefore, when you start seeing this whole thing coming into place, you recognize that there is a big change. And that's what they're trying to get a hold of. Now, notice something else. They now have began, these apostles don't, these disciples don't, but we see that with the apostles. They start to manifest the power of Christ that has come upon them now that Jesus is resurrected from the dead. And notice something else. Jesus said that would happen. The works that I do, you will do, and even greater than these. And so we realize that the anthropology has changed. They've deepened their understanding of who he is. And this is all part of this message here from the disciples at Emmaus. They're realizing that this Jesus resurrected from the dead, it was all planned. It was all part of God's plan. He is part of this. And now they see this is happening. But again, remember, no one has this full understanding because it's so big. It's so huge. I guess one of the things to look at it is if you can imagine I wouldn't necessarily want to use this because it's such a drastic example, but it's probably the only thing I can think of that would be on the same line, and that's 9/11. Once 9/11 happened, everyone knew that our world had changed and nothing was the same anymore. Well, on a positive level, the minute Jesus resurrected from the dead, everyone knew who encountered this that everything was different now and all was changed. But they hadn't fully understanding, just like after 9/11, they hadn't fully understood the impact of what that change means. And just after 9/11, we knew everything had changed, but we hadn't understood the impact of what that change means. And so we're seeing this drastic reality that they're coming to understand all is different now. And all of this was part of God's plan. Now, there's something we can look at. We can kind of look at a bit tomorrow and continue, because when we realize this, we realize not only is this a major change, but we can also see that we're still being impacted by it, and it is still ongoing. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day. Remember, we are here at midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning on WEZE from St. Anthony in Alston. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Alston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Alston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.